So welcome to, oh, that's loud. Help me SSIS logging. You're my only hope. There, I started with an please don't count, but if you did, that's going to be the only one. So if you're just now joining us, there are stickers up in the front. I'd say at this point, just wait till the end to come get some. Please silence your cell phones if you have not already. Give you a moment to do that. And then you've seen this slide 100 times already, all the different things PASS has to offer, local user groups, SQL Saturdays, online events, lots of ways to be involved. I am Vanessa Kesten. I'm a senior consultant for Kaizen Technologies. I've been working for over a decade with the Microsoft BI stack. Let's see. Yeah, it's not the slide I usually use. They gave me this, hey, fill this one in. I'm wishing I'd just used my regular because I have no idea what to say here. I am so sorry. We'll get into what I'm used to. So this is my normal intro slide. And so we are going to talk about built-in and custom logging for SSIS, and we're going to have a whole lot of fun. I have a volunteer that is going to read to us the next screen. Are you ready? Okay, is it on? We're good.
Hello. Quite recently, in an ETL system near you, you ran an ETL package saying, I have a bad feeling about this. The package began but never completed. With determination, you turned to the force of SSIS logging to save you from the dark side.
Thank you. So for his participation, he was given one of these candy dispensers, and I'll tell you about the other two now. They are, one, for the first person that asks me a question, and two, for anybody that can add something to the presentation that is relevant that I perhaps missed or didn't think to include. We also have lollipop rings. There are stormtroopers, Yoda, Darth Vader, and rebels. So that's for anybody who contributes in any way, a question, a comment, anything. I really want you to be involved and participate. So this is our session agenda. We will, of course, be talking about SSIS logging. First, I will do a demo solution. And I'm always imagining you going, what? You're doing the demo first? I'm not doing the demo first. I'm just giving you a background of what the demo is about so that when we go into the details of logging, you have some notion what's going on. And then we'll talk about logging providers, which were the only option up through 2008. And then we'll go into logging levels, which was a huge improvement with 2012. And also some custom logging options. Really, that's all the options in the world because it's code. You can write whatever. And then as some bonus material, I am going to be including some Azure Data Factory logging. So quick show of hands, how many of you have used Azure Data Factory? Just a couple. OK. Now, how many of you are actually interested in seeing the basic logging options? Just a quick overview for Azure Data Factory. OK, quite a few more. I figure I can expand the regular content session if nobody wanted to hear about that. So I just thought I'd check in. OK, so now we're going to look at the demo solution. And we're going to start with our data. So my Zoom's not working. That's fun. Oh, I know why. Excuse me a moment. I need to turn it on. I forgot to turn it back on after I rebooted. There we go. So I got this data off of a website called swappy.co. That's StarWarsAPI.co. It's got data about films, people. You can see planets, species, starships, lots of different things about Star Wars. If we go and look at the films file, You'll see it's a JSON file. We've got the title of the episode and episode ID. And then we have an array of characters that are in that episode. And you may notice that those are URLs. So you can actually go to the swappy.co address and put in, you can put in this URL in your browser, and it'll give you the JSON for that person. So that's just a basic idea of what the data looks like. And I have that link at the end of my slides, so if you're interested in playing with the data yourself, you can do that. And now let's take a look at the database. It's a pretty simplistic system because the point is to show you how logging works. So in the database, we have a file log that's part of the custom logging solution I'll show you. We'll get into that later. We have raw JSON files. So each of those, it just has the file name. I gave it a file type, a record count, and then it's just one big chunk of JSON data. From there, we're going to load that JSON data into the different file types. I don't know what I clicked there. That's fun. Yes, I want to cancel. So we have staging films, people, planets. So those are the same as the files that you saw. And then we have these bridge tables. So I'm just going to open up the films, and you'll see the data is just like what you saw in the file. You've got your title, you've got a director, and then you have more JSON data that's your characters. So from there, we're loading these bridge tables, and all they are is a list of that array broken out. So for this film, we have these people. So just really quickly, that's what our tables look like. And then we have a few stored procedures. We will go over those a little bit as we get into the demos later on. And then we have an SSIS solution. So this would be a pretty lame demo without that. So we have in the SSIS, let me zoom in a little bit. We have an extract raw that's just pulling into that raw table. And then we have transform main. That's what's loading those main tables, and then the bridge tables. And then we have a master data load. And then the other two here, I'll just mention briefly. Truncate all is just so I could reset the demo and rerun it. And then package one is because as I built this and worked with it, I discovered that I had built it a little bit too simple, and there were some things I couldn't demo because I didn't actually have a data flow. So package one is kind of an extra package that doesn't do anything we care about, but shows us some logging options. And then finally, on top of all that, I built a Power BI desktop solution. And here we have people by height, their species, and then we have different sizes of humans. And kind of halfway through my presentation, we'll take a little break because I get bored really easy, and we'll play with some of that data a little bit. So SSIS logging providers were the original option in SSIS. You can always do it, but it's not nearly as powerful as the logging levels. But if you have a really old SQL server that you're using SSIS on, they're your only option. So one of the reasons they're challenging is you have to set up logging providers in every package. So if for some reason you have an old system and you're starting out a new project, then I would really recommend that you create a template that you can then use repeatedly throughout your project, because otherwise you'll have to go in and set it up for every single one. And you have a number of configuration options. You have your output type. You can do XML, Windows events, SQL Server tables, a few different options. You have options for which tasks you want to log. So by that, I mean the tasks in your control flow in SSIS, and I'll show you that. And you also get to choose which events. Do you just want the error events? Do you want warnings, infos, and so forth? And then also event details, like do you want to know the computer that ran this, the operator? And I'll show you all those options right now. So I'm going to open up my extract raw package. And the package itself doesn't matter right now. We're going to go into the SSIS menu up at the top. And then we'll click logging. And this is where you set up your logging providers. So I'm going to get back out of my Zoom so you can see what we have here. On the side, we have the different tasks that are options. And then on kind of the main screen, we have the provider type. So I'm going to zoom in there first. This is where you would say what type of output you want. Do you want to put it in a text file, Windows Event SQL Server Profiler? So for my demo, I use SQL Server. Once you select your provider type, you click Add. And then you can see this button here is grayed out. And that's because I haven't selected any tasks to use it on. If I go back to the left side here, I can select the top level and say I want to log everything for this package. Or I can expand that and say I just want to do, my load file. That's all I want. And then my grayed out button here is now available. So if I click on that, zoom back out so I can see what I'm doing, and that turns on that log provider for that tasks. Now you can also go into details, and this is where you would set which events you're interested in. So there's on progress, on variable value. There's a lot of different options here. And you can also go to your advanced tab, which is where you set for each one of those events which information you want. Do you want the source ID? Do you want the execution ID? So you have a lot of variety here, but you have to go in and set it up for every single package. So to show you what this looks like when you use it, I'm going to go over here. This is just a quick query. I set it up to export to SQL Server, and that automatically puts it in this table called SSIS log. So you don't get to choose that. That's just where it puts it. And if I run that, then you can see on mine, I just kind of selected everything. I've got my event name, computer name, operator, what it came from. So it's some good information, and it's a lot better than nothing. But if you have 2012 or more recent, which I really hope you do, then this is not your best option. So let's talk about what we can do starting with SQL Server 2012. So with SSIS logging levels, you set the logging level for the entire server. Now, you do have the option to set it for an individual package, and I'll show you how to do that. But you can set it up for the whole server, and then you're done, and you've got your logging information. You have a couple different options how to view it, and I hope that most of you are familiar with the SSIS execution reports. In case you're not, we will cover that. And then you also can access it directly through SSIS DB queries. So just to talk a little bit about the logging levels, with 2012, we have 4 levels: none, basic, performance, and verbose. I'll go into what each of those are. And then starting with 2016, there's runtime, lineage, and custom. So the logging level none is very hard to understand. I mean, just see if you can wrap your head around this. It means it's not logging anything. The advantage is it's super fast, and the disadvantage is you have no information. Kind of reminds me of the security talk yesterday morning. You know, the advantage of deleting all your data is it's completely safe. The disadvantage is you have no data. All right, so the basic logging level is the default level. If you have not done anything and you've been using SSIS 2012 or above, you are currently logging all your packages at a basic level. And you can go in and look at all the data that's been collected. So it logs all of the events except for diagnostic and custom events. The advantage is it logs a lot of information, and it's easy because it's already set up. And a couple disadvantages, it can be slower than some of your other options. So if speed is an issue for you, that's something to consider. And then also the row count is available when you do basic logging, but it has to be parsed. You can't just query, give me the row count. You have to find it in a message and tweak it out of there. All right, so performance is typically faster. It does execution statistics, errors, and warnings. So you need to understand with the performance level, the idea is not this is the fastest logging level, it performs the best. It is that you are using it to figure out performance issues. So if you have a lot of data that you're handling, you're going to get a lot of information related to that, and it will slow it down while you're running it. But it'll help you know which parts are taking longer. It logs fewer events than basic, so if you're not doing a lot of heavy data, then it might be faster. But you can look and see the specifics about what's logged and what's not to see whether that's going to work for you, and you can just try things out. For performance level, there is no row count captured at all, and you may not have all the information that you want to have. Yes? I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
In the performance logging.
Yes. I don't believe so. I'm not sure. So the question was, in the performance level with the execution statistics, do you get an execution plan? And I do not believe that you do. And you're a winner! Would you like R2D2 or BB8? R2D2. So this is my coworker, Jimmy. He's going to bring it over to you. Thank you. So any questions from here on gets a lollipop ring that you may want yourself or you may want for your child. Up to you. I will not tell. And then we have BB8 for anybody that can add something that I've missed or anything. Yes?
You said in the basic logging level that it doesn't capture custom events.
Yes.
Does that count for things you code in script tasks?
I am guessing yes. The question is, if with the basic level, I'll go back there, it doesn't include custom events. And so the question is, would it capture like information about script tasks? My guess is no, but it is a guess. And I almost took that off the slide. I almost researched it more, and I didn't. So that would be a great thing to find out. And if you want to take my business card or leave me yours, I'll look it up and find out for you. So, lollipop time. You want a stormtrooper, Vader, Yoda, or Rebel?
Vader.
Vader. Here, Jimmy. Thank you. All right. Yes?
So I think in a script task, if you use the fire information or fire warning or whatever, those aren't considered custom messages. So they will get logged at the levels that are included here. Right? So there are those events that you can fire from within the script.
Okay, so it would depend on what you're doing in the script.
So there's fire warning, fire information, fire.
Right. So the comment, yeah, the comment is within a script task, if you fire a warning, fire an error, that those will get logged. They're not considered to be custom. And would you like BB-8?
Sure would.
Awesome. Yay, thank you for participation. All right, so going back to Verbose, it records all events. It's very, very detailed. It captures a row count separate that you can just query and get the row count, but it has lots of overhead. So you only want to use that when you're troubleshooting. Do not leave it running in production because that will take up some extra space you don't want to. So let's talk a moment for Runtime Lineage. This starts with 2016, And this is the sum of all the information I could find on the internet about it, except that it's not actually implemented. So don't use it. All right. And then we have the custom logging level, which allows you to set up options kind of similar to the logging providers. You can use an existing level like basic or performance and then make changes to it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can capture the row count. So if you want to use basic, you can do basic plus a row count. The disadvantage is depending on what version of SQL Server you have, you may not be able to set a custom level as your server-wide logging level. I'm not sure what version made that change. It seems like it was like partway through 2016, maybe with a patch or something. So you still may not be able to get all the information that you want. You can't get everything using custom, but you have a lot of flexibility there. And for the most part, 2016 or above, you can set it for server-wide. All right, so let's look at our demos. First, I'm going to show you how to set this up. Close our databases. And I'm going into the Integration Services catalog. And on SSIS, I'll go ahead and zoom in on that. On the SSIS DB, I'm going to right-click on that, and I'm going down to Properties. That brings up this dialog box. Zoom back out so you can see. And then about in the middle, we have the server-wide default logging level. That is where you would set what you want it to be. And you have your basic none, basic performance, and verbose that you can choose. So if you do not want to use one of those, you want to set up a custom level, you would right-click in the same place, SSIS DB, and then you can click on Customized Logging Level. So it's pretty simple here. I've got a basic light, but just to show you, I'm going to click Create, and I'll zoom in. And I'm just going to give it a name, Custom Level. And then down here at the bottom, it says Create from Existing Logging Level. So I'm going to check that box, and then I can choose any of the other logging levels. So let's say I want to do Performance. I'm going to click OK. And then over on the right, you can choose Statistics. Let me zoom into that. And then Events. So that's where it really gets into things. So I have Performance level was my version, and I'm going to add in on variable value changed. And then you would just save and zoom out so we can see. And now we have this custom level. I'm going to hit Close. And that's how you set that up. And I want to go look. I redid my computer recently, and I'm noticing I do not have. Ah, there it is. Thank you. I was like, where are they? So down at the bottom are my customized levels. Thank you very much. All right. So that's how you set up the server-wide. If you want to run a package at a different logging level just one time, you can right-click on the package and click Execute. And then under Advanced, you have your logging level here. So you can choose the regular ones or a customized level. And when you click OK, it'll run it with that logging level. If you want to run a particular package every time with a different logging level, you have to do it through SQL Server Agent. You can't configure the package itself to do that. So I created just this simple job called Master Data Load. And if I go into Steps, I have a SSIS package step. So going into that. And then on configuration, advanced, we have our logging level. I'm going to try to zoom in, but it seems like maybe zooms too far. So package, configuration, and then we have our logging level. So that's where you would set it if you wanted to run it regularly at a different logging level than your server-wide. Excuse me. So to show you what this looks like when you run your packages, first I'm going to show you the execution report. So let's get a raise of hands. Have you used SSIS execution reports before? So quite a few of you. Good. You should be familiar with this then. Those of you who have, obviously. If you haven't, you would not be familiar. So I'm going down to reports and all executions. You can do this on individual packages as well, but I did it on all packages. It's showing me I have no executions. That's because I haven't run it in the last week, and that's the default time period. So I'm going to go into my filter, and I'm just going to select the beginning of October. And then click OK. And now we have a whole bunch of runs. And I have some failed runs that I intentionally failed to show you something later. And I have written down my IDs for which types of logging levels I ran so that I can show you. So first I'm going to show you logging level none because that's the most interesting in the world. And I'm just going to all messages because that's where you really see the difference in the logging levels. And I have no messages because there was no logging. Surprise, surprise. All right, now we're going to look at basic. And we're going to go to all messages. And these are all on the master data load package. And if you scroll down, if you scroll slowly enough, you'll see how many pages. Oh, so 15 pages. I don't know if you can see that. So 15 pages of messages. Whoops, what did I do? There we go. For logging level basic. So we're not going to go and look at all of the details here. You can play with that on your own. I just want to show you kind of the difference in the amount of information that you get. So then I'm going to look at performance. And I wrote down the wrong thing on that. So hold on. 47. So on my performance in the execution report, I have nothing. And I will show you when we're done looking at the execution reports how to query the SSIS DB to get some of that performance information. So it really depends what your package is, whether anything's going to show up here. For my simple demo, nothing shows up. So obviously that's a lot less than basic. And if I go to verbose, you remember basic had 15 pages. Verbose has 124. So it's doing quite a bit more logging. And then custom, the one that I ran was actually basic, but I removed the on information events. So it'll be less than basic. But I could have added more events. Could have done whatever I wanted. But that's just 7, just by taking the information messages out. OK, so let's look at the queries. And I want to show you, first of all, just some very simple ways to get data from SSIS DB. So all I'm looking at is this table called event messages. So this is my logging level none, which of course is empty. And then if I go to basic, scroll over, I've got 550 rows. I'm going to zoom back out so we can look at what we have. So we have an event message ID, operation ID, message time, bunch of different information that's included in the event messages. So go query it, see what you find. And then here's my performance. Again, that's nothing. And so I tried running performance with my package 1 that had the data flow. I thought that would get me some information. It didn't. I think because it was moving such little data, I'm not 100% sure. But what you can see is instead of looking at the event messages, I'm going to look at this execution component phases. So that's the same. You can see it's the same operation ID, 47. And now, I'm not used to this Zoom thing. I've got 27 rows, and it's telling me my task name is data flow task. You can see I've got acquire connections, validate, release connections. I have start and end times. So that's with the performance on something with a data flow. Can be useful information. So if I go back to the basic level and look at the execution component phases, I've got nothing. So that's the difference there. One more thing I wanted to show you with performance is with the package 1, I just showed you I didn't get anything in event messages. However, if I force an error, I do get the error information. So I renamed my table that it was trying to dump to so that it couldn't get to it. All right, so let's look at Verbose. We're going to look at the event messages like we've been on the others. So just to review, for none, we have 0 rows. Basic, we had 550. Performance, we had 0. And Verbose takes a minute, and it's got 4,917 rows. So a lot more information there. And then if I look at the execution data statistics, when I don't have a data flow, I get nothing. But if I look at that when I do have a data flow, then I get just a couple lines here. So I have a data flow task, how many rows were sent and when, just a little bit of information there. So those are just really basic queries. We'll do the basic light too. So that's got 242 rows. So just taking out on information took out half of my logging. All right. So that's nice, but there is somebody who goes by handle Yorick, which has put out on GitHub some great queries that are a lot more detailed. So if you want to go in and play around, I'll show you. These are the queries that are out there on GitHub. So you can look up cache usage, package history, parameter values. I'm going to show you just a couple of these. They're a lot more complex than my examples. So this one is showing you the parameter values that are used to run the package. Let me just open this up real quick again, because this correlates to, in the reports, the parameters that it shows you on the overview page. So I'm just going to pick one and go to the overview. And over here on the side, you see parameters. You can see the logging level was 1 on this. I don't recall what the logging levels correspond to. And then the second one is values set in the package, which I didn't have any, so it's empty. But that can be really useful to see what parameters the package was run with. And then this one just shows you the breakdown of execution for a particular package. So it's just the basic things. This is my master data load, which runs extract raw data. I'll zoom in here. And transform main tables, transform bridge tables, and then that's the main package. But just to get a big picture overview, that's a really helpful query.
Does it also give duration then? It just gives starts and
I believe you're correct. I think you would have to update it yourself to get the duration. And then this one is a little more complex. It's going to show you the most recent execution of packages, and then for the first one in the list, it's going to give you more information. So it's saying these are the most recent things that have been run. The one at the top of the list is my package 1. Let me zoom in here. I keep hitting the wrong button. Okay, so package 1 is at the top, so the next one is showing me a history of the last 15 runs of package run. I've only got 7 runs. And then going on down, let's see what the next ones were. So showing different execution history, error messages, warning, information. And you can see I've got some things commented out that he included. So if you want to look for a particular message, it shows you how to do that. These are really good queries to use, and there's a link at the end of my PowerPoint to his GitHub. So feel free to enjoy that. Okay. So this is the point in my demo where I get bored. So I'm going to encourage everybody to just like stand up, wiggle about a little bit. Don't be embarrassed. These sessions are freaking long. I mean, come on, do a little dance, and let's look at some Star Wars data. Okay. So that should say species height. So this is just a little chart showing the height of different species. It's no huge surprise that the Hutts are the tallest, and Yoda's species is the smallest, so that's kind of funny that I mean, what is Yoda's species? Does anybody know? That's crazy. How is that possible? So anyway, they're the smallest. And then if we look at human sizes, before I go there, I want you guys to tell me, who do you think is the tallest, biggest person in the Star Wars movies, given that this is only the first 7 movies? That's all the data it has. What? No, human. Sorry, human. Darth Vader. Any other guesses? Peter Mayhew. Okay. So it is Darth Vader. And when I first did this, I was totally surprised, and I feel kind of embarrassed about this, because in my mind, Darth Vader was short. I have no idea how he got so tall. Somehow, I just missed that. They said that's Spaceballs. And then the smallest 2 people are Leia and Amidala, Padme. So that is interesting, at least a little. On the side here, we have our different data sets. Under films, we've got director, episode ID, opening crawl, things like that. People, we have their birth year, eye color, gender, height, mass, skin color. Planets, we have, okay, before I go on, I've got to tell you why I'm showing you our data fields. I want you to tell me things you want us to pull a report together on. So be thinking about that. So for planets, we have surface water, gravity, diameter, climate. Species, we've got, let me expand this a little bit. Average height, average lifespan, eye color, hair color, language. 2 more, starships. We have cargo capacity, cost and credits, max atmospheric speed, model, crew. Crew is like how many. And then vehicles, we again have some of the same things as starships, cargo capacity, cost and credits. We also have length, crew. Okay, so given that, what would you guys like to look at? Tunisia, okay. Okay, so the question or comment was in the first timers event, there was a question about where they filmed the scenes in Tatooine. And most of you heard the answer, so it's Tunisia. That information is not in here, but super cool, thank you. Would you like a lollipop ring? You want Vader, Stormtrooper, Rebel, or Yoda? Rebel. Here, Jimmy. The climate of Tatooine? Okay. So we're going to have climate, and let's see. We will add Tatooine to a filter. Tatooine, and we're going to need to zoom way in because that is tiny. It says it's arid. I don't know if you can see that. It is itty bitty. That's a little bit better. Okay, so let's look. Let's take that a little bit more. We're going to take this filter off. And I know they say pie charts are really boring and you should never use them. I like pie charts. I know it's terrible. It's embarrassing. Okay, so I need a measure. There we go. Yep. Okay, so we have a lot of large temperate. Let's add the, where is that? Data labels. Okay, so large temperate planets, or a lot of them, because we're summing it all up together. Anyway, so that's kind of cool. We've got arid, temperate, tropical, so I guess we have combinations, which makes sense. I kind of thought all the planets in Star Wars were like one climate for the entire planet. Have you ever noticed that? It's crazy. What kind of planets are those? All right. What?
Cost saving.
Cost saving, yes. Cost saving planets. Okay, so we'll get back to our regularly scheduled presentation. And let's talk about custom logging. So a disadvantage with custom logging is, again, you're back to having to set it up on every single package. So if you're starting out a new project, highly recommend if you're doing custom logging to set up a template so that it'll automatically be included in all the packages. You can log pretty much anything you want. You can do start and end times. You can do your parameter and variable values at different points in your process. You can do row counts at specific points. Whatever you want to do, you can log with custom logging because you're just writing code. So let's take a look at my simplistic demo. And in my extract raw data package, I have set up some event handlers. So first of all, I'm going to tell you, you don't have to do it with event handlers. That's my personal preference, but some people prefer to add script tasks in their control flow to handle logging instead because it's more visible. If you're using event handlers and you're working on a team, you need to make sure everybody in the team knows that that's where the code is, because it's like SSIS is in so many ways, you can hide code in lots of places. So people need to know that that's what you're using for logging. So on my event handlers, you can see when I first go there, it's empty. It says click here to create an on-error event handler for executable extract raw data. That's because I haven't set up an event handler for that. I have only set up an event handler on my load data task. So I have to, in my executable on the side here, let me zoom in again. I have to go down to load file. Once I do that and click OK, it automatically goes to an event handler I have set up. And you can see I've got a task here. So I'm going to zoom in again and just show you on the event handler list, if you click that, and it's a little hard to see with this dark theme, but the ones that have something are in bold. You can barely see it. So I have pre-execute and post-execute. I'm going to show you the pre-execute first. So I just have one task here. It's called log start of file load. And to do that, I'm just running a SQL statement, log file process. And that is a stored procedure that I'll show you in a minute. And I have a bunch of parameters I'm passing in. So the parameter mapping is over here. I'll just show you what I'm passing in. The execution ID, a file name, package name, and so forth. So it's pretty simple. And let's take a look at the stored procedure log file process. All right. So this stored procedure is just taking in the same variables that you saw a moment ago, and it is saying if my task name is has insert in it, then I'm figuring out what I want to call my task based on that. And if my log type is insert, I'm going to insert a record in my file log table. And if it is not insert, then I'm going to update the record that's been passed into me. So going back to SSIS, we're going to look at the post-execute, because there's one more parameter being passed in to the post-execute. You can see there's an extra question mark at the end there. If I go to my parameter mapping, my extra parameter is this record count. So there are lots of ways to do record counts. For this, I chose to make life easy, and I just passed it in. So I will show you where I am getting that record count. Ah, we have a question.
You mentioned the question marks, and that's why I hate all the destination, because the question marks, you have to follow the order. If you don't have it, you don't have it.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
So inside the OLP destination, you have question marks. You now need to match the order of the question marks with parameters.
Right.
If you don't have, you just name the parameter and put it anywhere.
Okay.
So the question is, any reason why you
There is not a reason. I actually was not aware of that. So thank you very much. Would you like a lollipop ring?
Sure.
Okay, what kind do you want? Vader, Stormtrooper, Yoda, and Rebel. Stormtrooper. Thank you very much. I will look into that. Okay. So in my load file task, I am setting, and this applies to the same thing there that he was just talking about. And I'm sorry, I didn't repeat what he said. So his comment was asking, is there a reason I'm using the OLEDB connection type instead of ADO.NET? Because if I use the OLEDB, I have to use these question marks, and then my parameters have to go in the correct order. But if you use ADO.NET, you can use names and put them in any order. And the reason is I was not aware of that. So really, really appreciate that. Thank you. OK, so in this case, I am running the load data file stored procedure, which has a output parameter. So we have this question mark at the beginning. And then in my parameter mapping, I need to include that at the top and use return value instead of input. So let's look at that stored procedure real quick. Close this one. So this is really simple. It's just grabbing the data from the JSON file, and all I wanted to show you was this. In this case, again, simple because easy to demo. I'm actually just reading the record count from the file. I'm not getting a real record count, but this is how you do a return variable. So you can do a select to get your record count or whatever information you want to return. All right. I've lost my place. Okay. So that's how I have my custom logging set up in the extract raw data. I'm not interested in this case in information about the package itself or the for each loop. I only am interested in the load file, so I just set it up on that. However, I also set up some logging on my master data load, which is just running 3 other packages. And in this case, I set it up on the master data load. Okay, maybe I didn't. I'm thinking when I did my restore that I messed that up. So there should have been a similar logging setup on the master package itself, and then it would record the logging for each of these. So my apologies that that was not set up right now. So let's look at the output. Once I've done all this, I can run various queries based on the file log that I've been putting data in. So if I just want to look at my raw data loads, this is the information I've included. I've got my execution ID, whether the status is complete or not. So as you're running your process, you can see this is in process, this is complete, because it will update that. I've got my begin and end times and my record count. So this is showing me the same record count from the raw JSON files table. So you can see that the record counts match up. I've got 7 from films and so on. And then if I look at staging, I have similar information. I've got my package name. I have different task names, my begin and end time. So again, this is pretty simplistic, but since you're writing your script task, you can do whatever you want with it. I'm just showing you the framework for how to go about it. So one of the fun things that you can do is then you can look at raw and main together. And I could write the query differently, but I wanted you to be able to see this easily. What I'm showing is each film type, I inserted 7 rows, and I loaded 7 rows. Inserted for people 87, loaded 87. So you could write that query to show you only ones where they don't match, so you can see if you dropped any data anywhere. But if I did that, they all matched, so it would have shown you nothing. So I set it up that way just to show you. Any questions right now? Yes?
So we're doing a package where we're loading a file. Anything that's successful goes into the good table. Anything that's failing goes into a bad table.
Okay.
Is it possible to track why records going into the bad table, the failures?
Absolutely.
And get a breakdown, like if it's a data type mismatch or...
Yes. So the question is, if you're running an SSIS package and you're putting success records in one place, failed records in another place, can you use custom logging to tell you what failed, why it failed, and so forth? And you can absolutely do that. I've implemented before where we had a client that wanted something very similar to that. They wanted to know if we tried to process their data and it failed, they wanted to know what row failed and why it failed. But you would have to implement that logic in your package to capture what's going on. So you could use your try-catch, a lot of different error catching options, but you can definitely do that. And I've got business cards up here. If you want to grab one and chat more later, feel free. Oh, and Lollipop. No? You're good? OK. So any other questions right now?
Would that be a place where the on-error event would come into play on that particular data flow task?
So the question is, would you use the on-error event handler for that? And you absolutely could. It depends on how you're setting up your package. If your error is being generated in the package, then yes. Depending on how you're handling errors, like if you're using a stored procedure, how you're processing an error, that may or may not capture an error. So it would depend on your specific scenario. Do you want a lollipop? All right, what kind do you want? Vader, Yoda, Rebel, or Stormtrooper? Stormtrooper, woohoo. Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else? All right. So we're ready for our bonus material right on time. I'm really happy about that. OK, so Azure Data Factory logging. And I'm not going to go into as much detail on that. We've only got about 15 minutes left. But I'm just going to do a little bit of an overview. There are 3 basic ways you can get logging information with Azure Data Factory. You can use the monitor that's inside Azure Data Factory itself. I'll show you that. You can use the Azure Monitor logs. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. That's not my favorite option. You can also set up a log analytics workspace, and there is a preview workbook that I will show you that I think is a pretty good option. So if you are using the monitor inside of Azure Data Factory, it runs inside there. It's easy. It's kind of the first thing people learn to use typically. And the disadvantage is whoever's looking at it has to have access to go into that data factory. So if you have a developer that needs to look at logging for production, you don't want them to have access to that data factory. So some of the other options would be better, where they can look at logging without actually getting into the data factory itself. And then there are also some limited options for customization. For Azure Monitor Logs, you can use that to monitor any Azure resources. So if you're doing a lot of stuff in Azure, it can get cluttered. But there is no need for access to the actual data factory. The disadvantage is it, to me, is complex to navigate and figure out, probably partially because I haven't done it a lot yet, but not the easiest option. So that brings me to the Log Analytics Workspace, which is kind of a happy marriage here because, again, it's analytics for Azure resources. So it's not just like raw data. You can get some charts and different information that's a little easier to read. And again, there's no need for access to the data factory, but it has some pre-configured visuals that you can use, and it's very customizable. And let's see. So it takes some additional setup, and I'm not planning to go through that, but if we have time, I could. And it is more complex than the data factory monitor itself, but definitely easier than just the Azure monitor. OK, let's see. Let me get reconnected here. All right, so this is my Azure portal. I've got a few different things here. I'm going to start by going into my Star Wars Data Factory. And if you're not familiar with Data Factory, that's OK. The first thing we want to do is go into this author and monitor. That's both where you create pipelines and where you would monitor inside of Data Factory. I know a lot of you said you weren't familiar with Data Factory, so I'll go over this a little bit. So the opening page is just like a start page. Pretty much ignore it. If you go to the next one, this is where you author your pipelines. You set up connections. and you set up your data sets and your pipelines. I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but this bottom tab is Monitor. I'm going to zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. So that's Monitor. And just like we saw with the SSIS execution reports, it's defaulting to well, in this case, a 1 day instead of a 1 week time period. So I'm going to change that time period since I know I haven't run anything that recently. And it's not wanting to let me get down. Come on. I know there's an OK button down there. OK, I got it. Oh, it's still just got 1 day. Sorry, I'm having a mouse issue up here. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, the interface is a little bit different. Why is it doing that to me? Well, I thought that I did. That is true. There we go, data. Okay, so here we have information about all the pipelines that I've run. I have a copy raw data pipeline. Under actions, we have view activity runs, which I'll show you in a moment, or you can even just rerun it. It gives you the start time that you ran it and your duration and how it was triggered, what made it run, and whether it succeeded. I don't have any parameters on these. If you have parameters, you can also look at those here. So I'm going to go into my view activity runs. Woo. So it's showing that in that pipeline, I ran copy species, then I ran copy starships, and so on. It tells you what type of activity it is, and then it also shows you actions. So I like this. It shows you the inputs, which is code. It's not super easy readable, but it's still really helpful. You can see what went into it, and then what came out. So that can be really useful. And then also you have a little details. Let me zoom back out. So the details shows you your, did not mean to click that. Shows you the data you've read, how many objects, a lot of different information. So there's some good information here. Something I forgot to mention earlier with the SSIS execution reports, one of the drawbacks is that there's not a good way to export it. So that's where querying the SSIS DB directly is really helpful if you want to query and output and filter and so forth. So this is kind of the same way. There's not a good way to just export the data. But it does give you, whether you failed, whether you succeed, some basic information there. So that's your first option. Going back to my Azure portal, I'm going to click on my menu over here and go down to Monitor. We'll click on that. And then at the top, over on the left, we have Logs. So if I click on Logs, it opens up this query panel. And the language it uses here is called KQL. So it's kind of related to SQL, but not entirely. And I am honestly not familiar with it. So I have not played with this. It seems more complex than necessary for my needs, but you can learn it. And I will show you the next option I'm going to go into is my brain just stopped, is a way that you can learn KQL a little bit more easily. So before I do that, I'm going to go back into the monitor and show you how to set up the logs, because they're not automatic like in SSIS. You have to go into your diagnostic settings. So I'm on my Azure monitor here. If I go into diagnostic settings, then I have some different resources. My Azure Data Factory, it says enabled, and these others say disabled. That just means I haven't set up any logs on them yet. So if I click into one of those, I still have the option to add a diagnostic setting. I'm not going to do that right now because it takes a minute, but I will show you. Let me get back there. Just a moment. I'll show you the diagnostic settings I have set up on the Star Wars Data Factory. A question?
Any monitoring, does it add any additional cost to API?
The monitoring, yes, it can add extra cost. The question was whether monitoring adds extra cost to your Azure, and it can. I believe, unless you're monitoring a lot, I don't think it makes a significant difference, but that's definitely something to look into. All right, so for the data factory, and have you gotten a lollipop? Do you want one? You got one? Do you want another? You asked another question. You can totally have a second. Okay, perfect. Okay, so for my Star Wars settings that I already set up, I'm going to go into Edit Settings just to show it to you. So I set up to archive it to a storage account. I told it where to put the data. I said to send it to Log Analytics. So you have a lot of standard options here, but there's one thing I wanted to show you is this destination table. You have an option, this is pretty new, for Azure Diagnostics. Let me zoom in here. Or resource specific. So if you do resource specific, it sets up tables for that particular resource, which makes it easier to query separately from your other logs. And then you can choose how long you want to retain the data, what types of things you want to log. So you have a lot of different options there. And then the last thing I want to show you is this Log Analytics Workspace that I set up, and then there is a solution on top of that. That's actually the one I'm going to show you. And this is in preview. You can see Workbooks Preview. And then I did not set anything up here other than installing it. But it set up visuals for me. And again, my time range is not anything I have data in, so let me change that from the last 48 hours. I'm just going to say the last 90 days. And you can see I have run pipelines 20 times and some various data here. And you can scroll down and see activity runs by data factory. There's not a lot of variety in my data because I am not running an actual project here, just a few different things, but you can see succeeded, trends, and what's really cool is this is all editable. So if I click on Edit at the top, then every piece of this is something I can change, even like the drop down for the time range. If I click Edit, I have my time range here, and I can change it to a different style. I can change it however I want. So I'm going to go out of that one. And then for the areas that have actual data, let me zoom in over here. There's this little button that will open up the query used to run that. So this is a tool that you can use to help you learn KQL if you're interested, because you can look at how is this being generated, and you can also use it to change what information is showing. So like this one is showing where the status is not in progress. You could change it to something else. So I'm going to get out of that. And that's just a really quick overview of logging options and Data Factory Analytics. I do have business cards up here. I have not included in my resources information on how to set this up. There's plenty online, easy to get to, but I do have kind of a pared down version of how to set up this analytics workbook. If you're interested, just message me and I'll send it to you. And thank you very much for coming to my session. I appreciate you all. We have a question here.
Yeah, back on the SSIS, you were doing the logging row counts. Did you have to add the row count task everywhere throughout your package in order to capture that, or are you capturing that?
In the SSIS package, am I capturing the row count everywhere, or do I have to set it up in each package? I'm not sure I understood the question.
Everywhere I've seen it, I've brought in data that I've had to add a row count task.
Oh, right, a
In my
row count,
pipeline in
right.
order to get to the row count. But in the logging, are you having to do that, or is it pulling it from the actual task?
So you can pull it from that row count task if you're already doing that.
But I don't have to add that, if you can get it from the original
Yes,
source?
that's right.
Draw? Okay,
Yep. You want a lollipop?
sure.
All right. What do you want?
Oh, we'll do Darth Vader.
Darth Vader. Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you again, everybody. There are stickers up here, plenty of them. And I think that's it. Thanks.